Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. This webinar will focus on what code officials need to know about the Energy Rating Index compliance path found in the IECC. My name is Ryan Mears, and I'm the Program Director for RESNET. Webinar is being recorded, and it will be made available for future viewing. If you'd like a copy of the slides from today's presentation, please send me an email. My email address will be at the end of the presentation. If you have any questions, please enter them into the questions tab on the GoToWebinar toolbar. There should be plenty of time at the end of the presentation to be able to answer questions. And if I see some come through that are pertinent to the slide I'm on, then I'll go ahead and answer them right away. Just a quick overview of what we're going to discuss today. First of all, we'll get into what the ERI is. Why is it that code officials should expect to see an increase in homes that are being that are using the ERI for code compliance purposes? And then who can verify compliance with the ERI path, as well as how to verify compliance. And then I'll touch on some of the intricacies of using the HERS index for demonstrating ERI compliance. So hopefully many of you have seen a chart like this one that lays out the various compliance paths within the energy code. Of course, all the compliance paths need to comply with the mandatory requirements. And then you have your prescriptive path, which is probably one of the most common compliance paths, although I think that's changing, and I'll get into that a little bit in the presentation today. And then there's also a total UA alternative compliance. And if you've ever received a res check documentation for compliance, then that builder is using the total UA alternative. There's also a simulated performance path, which is another performance option within the IECC. And then finally is the newer path, which is the Energy Rating Index. And there's sometimes confusion about why there are two performance paths within the IECC, and I'm going to explain some of that next. So we have the simulated performance alternative, which is section R405 in the IECC. It's been in the IECC since the first edition in 2000. This path existed in previous model codes through the other organizations like the Model Energy Code. Up until 2009, the simulated performance path was really what we would call a true performance path. It was an energy cost or energy use comparison where you compared a reference home to a rated home, and so long as the home that was being rated used less energy than the reference home, then you were in compliance with the code. This changed in 2009 when some amendments were approved that removed the option for builders to get credit for using high efficient HVAC and water heating equipment. And basically what that did was make the simulated performance alternative more or less like the prescriptive path, because it removed any real flexibility in design that builders had. So then jump forward to the 2015 IECC, where the ERI is now an option, and you're getting back to what we call a true performance path. The ERI simply, sets a target score that builders need to achieve. It accounts for high efficient equipment. It incorporates almost every energy end use within the home. So that's one reason that I think that the ERI is going to see more uptake than the simulated performance alternative ever did. So if you're calling in from a jurisdiction that's currently under the 2009 or the 2012 IECC, you don't have the ERI option unless your state or jurisdiction has amended the code to allow either ERI or HERS to be used for compliance. The ERI path came in first into the 2015 IECC, and it will also be included in the 2018 IECC, which was just published a few months ago. So a question I often get is, what exactly is the ERI? What does it mean? What's the concept around it? So when you look at the two codes, the 2015 and the 2018 code, the 2015 code has a generic description of what the energy rating index is. It basically says it's an index scale where a 1 point change is equivalent to about a 1% change in energy use. The reason that generic language exists in the 2015 code is that the ANSI standard 301 was not yet available to reference within the 2015 code. However, in the 2018 version, the ANSI standard is included, and essentially the definition and the use of ERI is fully laid out within that standard. So what does it really mean to have an index scale? Generally, the scale operates from 0 to 100, but in actuality, it can go very far negative, and it can go well above 100, especially when you start talking about older existing homes. A 100 represents a home that was built in compliance with the 2006 IECC, and a 0 is roughly a net zero energy home, but more importantly, it's a home that is 100% more efficient than the 2006 IECC. When you look at the current data for HERS rated homes, the current national average is actually a 61, which is going to be roughly 40% better than the 2006. So the HERS index, which I'll also be discussing today, is a proprietary system that was developed by RESNET that can be used for ERI compliance. And the original HERS index standard is what informed the development of standard 301, which is now an ANSI standard. So I wanted to just introduce the basic concept of an energy rating, and I'll use the HERS index as an example. So you have there's two homes essentially that are being modeled at the same time. You have your reference home. The reference home is automatically generated by the software as the rater enters in the components of the rated home. The reference home establishes the baseline that the rated home is compared to. And as I'd mentioned, the minimum requirements for the reference home are established within the 2006 IECC and also federal law when it comes to equipment efficiency standards. Now, the rated home is essentially the as-built home or the as-designed home, depending on when the rating is being done. And as you enter in components that are more efficient than what the reference home has, you will reduce your energy use. And if you enter in something that is less efficient than the reference home, then your energy use will increase. Okay, so there was a question that came through about national average on the last slide, and it's asking if the national average is not an average of all homes, but average homes that are scored using the HERS system. That is correct. That national number is based on all homes that have been HERS rated to date. So why is it that code officials should learn more about the ERI and understand it? And I think that one of the reasons is that you're going to see an increase in homes that are demonstrating compliance using the ERI path, and I'll get into some of the detail exactly why I think that is coming up. First of all, the popularity of the HERS index has increased significantly just within the last 5 years. Back in May of this year, RESNET eclipsed 2 million HERS rated homes within the RESNET National Building Registry. And one reason that's a significant milestone is that the second million homes were achieved in about half as much time as the first million. So there's significant increase in year-over-year ratings to the point where now we're seeing ratings each year come in up over 200,000 ratings. This map here is actually a percentage of new homes that were HERS rated in comparison to all residential construction starts within each of the states. And this is a study that was done using the RESNET HERS data, and it was done by Dave Roberts at NREL. And you'll see that there are 3 states that really stand out. So the lighter the color, the higher percentage of HERS rated homes within those states. And Massachusetts, Indiana, and Iowa are the 3 states that all have more than 50% of the new homes being built in those states are receiving a HERS rating, which is a pretty significant number. And oftentimes I get the question of why is California so low? And the primary reason for that is that California has their own, essentially their own HERS standard and green building program that is used there, and those homes are not loaded into the RESNET buildings registry, so they're not accounted for. And then we have exactly what states is the ERI adopted in. There's currently 14 states that have adopted ERI, and there's somewhere north of 300 local jurisdictions that use either the ERI or they directly reference the HERS index in some cases. In addition to that, North Carolina and also Georgia are in the process or have just recently finished adopting the ERI within their new energy code, but it hasn't taken effect yet. I would say in the future, you can expect these numbers to increase fairly significantly because there's more and more states that are looking to the 2015 and in some cases the 2018 code as the next code they're going to adopt. And I think you're going to see an increase in the ERI adoption as the 2015 code gets more adoption across the country. In addition to that, there's a lot of other programs. This is kind of an overlooked reason for the popularity of the HERS index in ERI. There's many national as well as local and regional and also utility programs that are based on HERS. There's utility programs that offer incentives to builders if they achieve a certain HERS index score. There's also programs like Energy Star and the National Green Building Standard and even LEED for Homes, where these are the energy portions of those 2 green building programs are founded on the HERS index, and that's one option that can be used, a target index score, in order to meet the requirements for the energy efficiency provisions within those programs. So oftentimes you're going to see that although the home may be branded as Earthcraft House or NGBS rated or certified or LEED for Home certified, that may be the brand that's on the home, but underlying that, the energy efficiency component is often the HERS index score. So that leads us to the next topic, which is who can verify compliance with the ERI? First of all, the ERI is unique among all the compliance path options within the IECC in that it is the only compliance path that requires verification by an approved third party. The code official, as I'm sure you're all familiar with, whenever approved is referenced within the codes, it reflects directly to the code official to make that approval. And the RESNET certified HERS raters are the most common option that's going to be used for verifying compliance with the ERI. One of the key questions that often comes up during state code adoption, and in some cases local code adoption as well, is how many raters are there available that can do this work? And sometimes it's directly in reference to the ERI. Other times it's in reference to other work that raters do frequently, like duct and envelope leakage testing or other types of energy code compliance verification. So this is a map, and it's slightly dated at this point. It's from July of this year, and it shows the number of certified raters in each state. So the red states, the ones that are listed in red, just indicate that in that particular state the ERI has been adopted. The rest of them, there's not been an ERI adopted at the state level. And you'll see that there are some states with significant concentrations of HERS raters, like Massachusetts and Texas and Florida, while there's other states that just have, one rater. And Alaska is one that comes to mind that just has one rater. But they also, Alaska, if you saw from the earlier map about the percentage of new homes being rated, Alaska rates close to 50% of their homes, which is not an excessive amount. It's in the neighborhood of 400 homes a year that one rater is handling. The next common question that comes up is, what does it take to become a certified HERS rater? And I can tell you that it's not a simple or easy process. The raters that go through it all have definitely put in a significant amount of work to obtain the certification. It starts out with a 40-hour course that has both a written and a practical assessment. Following that, there's an apprentice-style probationary period where a rater under the supervision of a provider will conduct a minimum of 5 ratings, in order to get out of that probationary period. And then they're also required to contract with a RESNET quality assurance provider. In some cases, raters may work directly for the QA provider. In other cases, they'll be independent raters, and they'll just need to establish a contract with one of the RESNET approved quality assurance providers in order for them to have quality assurance oversight of their ratings. In addition to that, there's professional development requirements, which is 18 hours every 3 years in order to maintain certification. So what can HERS raters do once they obtain their certification? What does that really qualify them for doing? One thing is energy efficiency plan reviews. Also, building envelope leakage testing, which is a fairly common use for raters, as well as duct leakage testing. They also conduct pre-drywall inspections where they're looking for insulation values and also how well the insulation was installed, as well as air sealing measures within the envelope, as well as duct sealing, and then verification of equipment values, as well as the U factors and SHGC for your windows. They can also do, obviously, full compliance with the Energy Rating Index, as well as conducting or building energy models in order to get the HERS Index score and the ERI, as well as energy uses and any number of other data points that come from the energy model. It's important to know that you can verify the current status of a HERS rater directly on the RESNET website. You can go to this link here at the top of the slide and enter in the rater's name, and it will give you the current status in ensuring that they are actively certified through RESNET and maintain that certification. RESNET also has another certification, which is called a rating field inspector. Now, rating field inspectors are the purpose of the rating field inspector is to assist HERS raters with the field work that is required within a rating. Unlike HERS raters, there are not RFIs in every single state, but there are more than 500 across the country. So as far as what RFIs can do, they can do the pre-drywall inspection portion of the rating. They can do the building envelope leakage testing, and they can do the duct leakage testing. The one thing that they're not going to be doing is the actual energy model to determine the HERS index score. Raters and RFIs both have a role that exists outside of the ERI path when it comes to other areas of compliance verification. And this, what I'm showing here is the kind of evolution of codes from 2009 to 2018, and whether or not duct testing and envelope testing is mandatory or optional, and then whether or not there's a standard that gets referenced for that. And you'll see that back in 2009, the only mandatory test was the duct leakage test. The 2012 added on the envelope leakage testing as mandatory. In 2015, both of them stayed as mandatory. And then for the envelope leakage test, there was an ASTM, 2 ASTM standards that were referenced for that. And then in the 2018, again, duct and envelope testing is mandatory. There's still not a duct testing reference standard, although one does exist that RESNET developed. The standard 380 is also referenced on top of the ASTM standards for the envelope leakage testing standard. And it's important to note that standard 380 does also address the duct leakage testing, but it did not get into the 2018 code for that purpose. Next, we're going to move on to exactly how to verify compliance with the ERI. This section will get into more of the details of what code officials should expect to see when a builder is using the ERI path, some of the documentation that may be provided, and what some of the requirements are for software and submitting documentation to the local code official. So back to this, our compliance paths chart. Mandatory provisions are required for every compliance path, not just the ERI. There's mandatory provisions for prescriptive and simulated performance as well, and that's no different here. So some of the mandatory requirements that get addressed include air sealing, your maximum fenestration U factor and SHGC, programmable thermostat requirement. For heat pumps, there's a requirement for having a supplementary heat control, or electric resistance backup heat for heat pumps, as well as sealing of ductwork, air handlers, and filter boxes for doing duct leakage testing. There's a provision where it disallows the use of framing cavities for ducts or plenums. It addresses heating and cooling equipment sizing, mechanical system, piping insulation for northern climates, snow and ice melt controls, as well as mandatory requirements for high efficacy lighting. Next is about the software tools and what software can be used for ERI. And in the 2015 code, it actually, the requirements basically mirrored the simulated performance path, and that it basically just outlines the capabilities of the software that can be used for demonstrating compliance with the ERI. Basically just says that the software is required to be able to auto-generate the reference design based on your rated design inputs, and also produce an inspection checklist and a series of other requirements. In the 2018, it's a little bit different because the RESNET ICC standard 301 now addresses software. And so it basically says that in the 2018 IECC that the software tools that are used have to be in accordance with the RESNET ICC standard 301. And I list three of the most common software tools for doing ERI or your HERS index calculations, and that's energy gauge, rem rate, and ecotrope. There are other softwares that are approved for doing HERS ratings and ERI, but I'm not aware that those softwares have ever actually been used to do a confirmed rating. Then there's also requirements for the software to generate a compliance report. The software tools have to generate a report that documents the compliance of the ERI rated design. So the home that is being built is the rated home. And the compliance documentation, some of it's just basic. It has to have an address or a lot number, some way to identify where the home is. It has to be able to produce an inspection checklist that documents the components of the rated home, as well as the name of the individual that actually completed the report. And then finally, that report also has to include the name and the version of the compliance software tool that was used to generate it. The code also allows code officials to require some additional, if they choose, they can require some additional documentation, which includes documentation about the reference design, what were the characteristics of the reference design that was used to determine the ERI score for the rated home. They can require a builder to sign a certification signing of what the building component characteristics are of the rated home. And then also documentation of the actual values that were used in the software calculations for the rated design. So the code allows, some things are mandatory in this, that what software tools are required to do. And there's another section that allows code officials the option of requiring certain things. So when it comes to code compliance, broken down in three sections: permitting and plan review, the inspection process, and then the certificate of occupancy. For the permitting and plan review, there's what's referred to as a projected rating. A projected rating is one that is based on the actual building plans, and the anticipated design and specifications of that home are used to determine the ERI or HERS score in a projected rating. You can also, during the permitting process, verify that the HERS rater that's listed has been certified with RESNET, and also expect them to submit an inspection checklist of what they're going to be checking for when they go out as a third party to verify compliance with the mandatory items as well as the items that were entered into the software. So the inspection process is, because the ERI is unique in that it requires a third party, the third party responsible for doing the inspection, the code official should request a completed inspection checklist and also verify that the mandatory requirements have been met during that inspection. And in reality, the inspection checklist should demonstrate that. So that's one place you can look to review and ensure that the mandatory requirements have also been met. And then finally, during the certificate of occupancy, you should request the rating certificate, and I'll show an example of that shortly. Also, request the results from the duct and envelope leakage testing. Ensure that the rating is either a confirmed rating or a sampled rating. You cannot, for a certificate of occupancy to be issued, you should not accept a projected rating for the issuance of the C of O, because a projected rating is not considered an official rating. A confirmed or a sampled rating is considered an official rating, and that rating gets entered into RESNET's National Buildings Registry and can be verified there. So you want to accept the confirmed or sampled and not a projected rating before issuance of the C of O. So the ERI is fairly simple, and one of the reasons that I had mentioned it, I think it's going to gain a lot more popularity, is that it allows a lot of flexibility for builders and designers in how they comply. And one of the reasons for that flexibility is just a simple target score based on climate zone that builders have to meet in order to comply. Now, these are the scores that are included within the 2015 and the 2018 versions of the IECC. And as you can notice, from 2015 to 2018, the scores actually got a little bit more relaxed, so they're slightly easier to achieve in the 2018 compared to the 2015. And I'll discuss one of the reasons that happened in a minute when I talk about solar and the role that solar and renewable energy plays within the ERI path. So here is an example of some sample reports that using the Ecotrope software. On the left side here is a home energy rating certificate or a HERS certificate, and you'll notice that it specifically says confirmed report. It also lists the registry ID number. That ID number references directly back to how to find that building or that home that is where it is included within the RESNET buildings registry. It's going to show your HERS index score, annual savings, as well as some other energy use statistics for that home. And then on the right side, you have an ERI, a 2015 IECC ERI certificate, which is maybe slightly different, but essentially includes a lot of the same information. Again, it says that it was a confirmed rating. This one lists the rater's ID number, so you can verify that rater is actively certified. And then it also lists down in the middle section here what the code requires for the maximum ERI score, and then what the home scored for its ERI. And then it also this is where whoever performed the calculations is required to sign off on it as well, and list their information within that box. And this is a sample checklist. This is also from the Ecotrope software. It is a sample of a checklist of the mandatory requirements. You'll notice all the way over in the far right column, it's where it says compliance decision. It'll say whether or not it passed, or if it's something where there's an additional form required, or there's some additional information that is required through that. And this is on the left column. It's going to list all the section numbers within the IECC that are mandatory, and then exactly what that section addresses, what component or what area of the code it addresses, and then whether or not it was passed. So this is an example of the checklist that would be completed and then entered in as verification after the inspection. This is what as a code official you should expect to see something like this submitted after the inspection has been done. So the really big topic that during the 2018 IECC code hearings was revolved around solar or renewable energy more generally, but for the large part, solar's the biggest player there. And one of the issues is that HERS, the home energy rating system, does allow renewables to have an impact on the energy score, your index score that comes out of it. And the primary concern is that builders are going to use solar to trade off for efficiency measures like insulation or windows or efficient equipment or something. That they would, if they can find solar cheaper, that they would trade it off in exchange for real efficiency measures. And where this was a particular concern was related to options in certain states where builders could enter into a no upfront cost lease on solar equipment, which then gets handed off to the homeowner, thereby allowing them to achieve a lower index score and not actually incur any real costs for the solar system that allowed them to obtain that score more easily. A lot of the discussion at the 2018 code hearings revolved around just whether or not renewables should be included in the IECC. It's considered an energy conservation code, not a generation code. Is a kind of a common sentiment that was expressed. So there are a few states that have dealt with this. Texas said, no, we're not going to allow renewables to be included. Massachusetts and Vermont took kind of a hybrid approach where they said, yeah, we're going to allow renewables to impact the index score, but we're going to limit the impact they can have. And then most of the states have just been silent on it. They haven't made any amendments or changed the provisions of the ERI in 2015. And then the question is how. If we're going to allow renewables to be included within the ERI, how should that be implemented? One way is to require a thermal backstop to say, so long as you meet these envelope values, then you can use solar to impact your score in any way. The other one is to say, well, require a target score before renewables can count. So to say you can achieve an index score of 57 before renewables can start to count toward lowering that score toward the target number. So how this is actually implemented within the IECC, for the 2015 version, it's just silent. It doesn't make any mention of renewables or solar within the ERI path. And that's one of the issues, is why states during the adoption process, why some states chose to address renewables, because they felt like it could be a potential issue within the ERI. For the 2018, there was a change. One of the biggest changes within that code cycle is that there was a consensus proposal that was put forward, had a significant amount of support from the insulation industry, from builders, from a lot of energy code advocates, and many others that were involved with the ultimate development of that final proposal. So what it does is it sets the 2015 envelope levels as a backstop for any home that wants to use renewables. So if you're a builder that uses renewables, at a minimum, you have to meet the envelope requirements of the 2015 code, and then you can use renewables to impact your index score however you want to. However, for builders that don't use renewables, the 2009 IECC still remains as the backstop. And that's the same for the 2015 code. The 2015 code put in this envelope backstop, where the 2009 envelope levels were the worst that you could do before it counted for the ERI. And then the last topic is using the HERS for ERI compliance. And there are some, I have addressed some of the intricacies of how HERS operates. And when I was mentioning the use of a projected versus a confirmed or sampled rating for issuing a CFO, and a projected rating for during plan review is fine. As far as the rating process goes, there's really three main components. The first one is the projected rating. Again, it's going to be based on your plans. It provides a HERS score that's based on the anticipated design of that home. The second one is your pre-drywall inspection, which looks at your insulation, grades the insulation, installation, air sealing, windows, HVAC equipment. And then you get to the end and you have your final inspection. During the final inspection, there's the envelope tightness testing is done, the duct tightness testing is completed, and then there's the issuance of the rating certificate. And that's where it should say that it's a confirmed rating. Because if there are any differences in the final inspection, so the rater is going to make some estimate of what he believes that the duct and envelope leakage will be for that particular home, usually based on the fact that he's worked with that builder before and knows, about what they can expect to hit. So if those numbers are drastically different, once the final inspection is done, then the rater would need to go back and revise the energy model to see what impact that has on the actual index score. And then so one of the most significant benefits of using HERS for ERI compliance is that it has a quality assurance component. All HERS rated homes are subject to RESNET's quality assurance oversight. This includes both a file review, which is reviewing the inputs that were made into the energy modeling software, as well as a field review. And those are based on the number of ratings that the rater does. So the more ratings they do, the more file reviews and field reviews they will have to have conducted each year. And as I mentioned in the beginning, that work is actually done by quality assurance providers. It is overseen by RESNET, but it's the RESNET approved quality assurance providers that actually do a large amount of the field work for that. The actual quality assurance procedures and the requirements are included within Chapter 9 of what we refer to as MNHERS, which is the Mortgage Industry National Home Energy Rating System Standards. And that was the original HERS standard before the ERI was developed into an ANSI standard. And another benefit is that there are HERS raters in every state. So the skilled and trained workforce is there available to be able to do ERI compliance. There's also some benefits to the builder as well. And I think I've touched on each of these. Flexibility in design is a big draw for ERI compliance and why a lot of builders choose to use the HERS index. As well as quality assurance from a code official perspective, you can have some you can feel good about the fact that the HERS raters that are doing the ERI compliance have some level of oversight that's done. From a builder perspective, it's almost a little bit different, and they often view HERS raters as their own quality control. So they have this independent third party that's coming into each of their homes and doing an inspection and testing their envelope and duct leakage, and it's one extra level of oversight and ensuring that they're delivering a good product to their customer. There's also, especially when compared to the prescriptive requirements of the code following that, there's a fairly significant cost savings that builders can see by using ERI or HERS to achieve ERI. And then again, there's over 1,900 certified raters across the country that are available to assist builders in using the ERI for energy code compliance. And with that, here's my contact information. If you have any questions, please enter them in to the questions tab on the GoToWebinar toolbar. And if you're interested in receiving a copy of these slides, I'd be happy to send them to you. Just shoot me an email, ryan@resnet.us, my email address. And so again, the webinar was recorded, and it will be made available for future viewing. If you have colleagues that were not able to attend, then they can certainly watch the recorded version. All right, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at some of the questions we've got. Okay, one question says, why would the 2009 IECC insulation levels be the backstop for houses without renewable if the 2018 is adopted? Interesting question, and I was involved with the ERI, the initial development of the ERI compliance path proposal back in 2013 when the hearings to determine the 2015 code were determined, and the initial proposal did not include a backstop. We didn't feel a backstop was necessary. We had the target index scores were fairly stringent, and we didn't feel like it was necessary to include some backstop. However, in the sausage making process of code development, some other opponents came to the table and said they'd feel comfortable supporting the proposal if we put in some backstop for it. And so we chose the 2009 IECC as a backstop that builders were comfortable with fairly easy to achieve. And so that's why it was included. And it is a little bit odd to have a newer code that references provisions within an older code. It has been done in other areas as well, but in this case, it is the 2009 IECC if you're not using renewable energy within your compliance. Next question asks, why is the ERI target score lower in the 2018 code as opposed to the 2015? So the primary reason for that, first of all, I should say that there was the target scores that got included within the 2018 code were actually proposed as a public comment to the 2015 code, and it was an odd hearing, but it ended up not getting approved, although it had support from energy code advocates and builders alike. It was just an odd hearing at that point, and it didn't end up getting approved. So essentially what happened is for the 2015 code, we came in with some rather low index target numbers with an understanding that we could negotiate up from there, but it would be difficult to negotiate lower numbers. So we did that. That's exactly what happened. Unfortunately, that proposal did not get approved during the hearing, and so it ended up with the more stringent numbers. Those same proponents that were part of that during 2015 came back during the 2018 code cycle and submitted a proposal to make that the new target numbers, and it ended up getting lumped in with a deal on the renewable energy issue. So that's ultimately how the numbers ended up being a little bit higher, and in the 2018 code. All right, next question asks, to prevent potential conflicts of interest, are there any restrictions on who can be a HERS rater on a given project? So there's not necessarily restrictions on that from RESNET. RESNET does have a code of ethics for raters to follow, which requires certain disclosures. If for raters, if there is a conflict of interest in a job that they're doing, but when you start using HERS for ERI compliance, then you'll remember back to my early slide where it said that the ERI path is the only one that requires an approved third party to verify compliance, and that the approval of that third party is left to the discretion of the code official. So they could put any restriction they chose on what HERS raters could, what conflicts they're trying to avoid as far as any conflicts of interest within a certain project. They could put those in place. Next question asks, how involved RESNET ratings are with the NYSERDA programs. I know that there are raters that are involved with the NYSERDA work, although I'm not terribly familiar with exactly what those programs are or how they operate. In general, when there is a HERS rating requirement or an incentive to achieve a certain HERS index score, then a rater will be involved with that project. All right. I'm not seeing any more questions, so if you have another question that's come to mind, please enter it now. All right. Well, it looks like we've covered all of the questions, so I will give you back about 10 more minutes of your hour. Thank you for joining the webinar today. By all means, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. If something comes up after the webinar is already completed, feel free to shoot me an email. I'll try to answer all the questions that I get. Thanks again for attending, everyone. Have a great weekend.